The massive viewing window on the Endeavour offered a perfect view of the Galactic Confederation headquarters as it orbited the neutral planet Nexus Prime. Lieutenant Alan Murphy stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the hundreds of alien ships coming and going. 5 years since humans had joined the Confederation, and he still felt like an outsider. Admiring the view again, Lieutenant. Ambassador Susan Kayes appeared beside him, her formal diplomatic uniform crisp and immaculate. "Just reminding myself how small we are in the grand scheme," Alan replied. He adjusted his security badge and straightened his posture. As head of the ambassador's security detail, he needed to look sharp for tonight's diplomatic reception. The Endeavour was humanity's pride, their first true interstellar diplomatic vessel. But compared to the Phyrexian warships or the elegant Tellurian cruisers, it looked like a child's toy. "Don't let them get to you," Ambassador Kayes said quietly. "They've had thousands of years of space travel. We've had decades." Alan nodded. "I know, but the way the Phyrexians look at us, like we're insects." Kayes finished his thought. "That's why tonight's reception is so important. Captain Ortiz is counting on us to make a good impression." 3 hours later, Alan stood at attention along the wall of the main reception hall as aliens from 27 species mingled. The air recyclers struggled to accommodate the different atmospheric needs, creating a slightly foggy haze near the ceiling. "The humans continue to surprise me," a tall, blue-skinned Tellurian was saying to his companion. "Who would have thought such a primitive species would develop faster than light travel so quickly?" Alan kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened. This was mild compared to what some species said. The reception was going smoothly until Commander Kha'Zix arrived with his Phyrexian delegation. The reptilian officer stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scaled skin gleaming under the lights. The bone ridge above his eyes gave him a permanently angry expression. Ambassador Kayes approached the Phyrexian delegation with a diplomatic smile. "Commander Kha'Zix, welcome aboard the Endeavour *. We're honored by your presence." Kha'Zix's yellow eyes narrowed. "The honor is questionable, Ambassador. I find it strange that the Confederation continues to waste resources on such an undeveloped species." The room quieted. Several aliens turned to watch. "Perhaps," Ambassador Kayes replied smoothly, "you might reconsider once our trade agreement is finalized. Earth has much to offer." Kha'Zix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, I've reviewed your proposal. Primitive technologies and basic resources. Nothing we cannot obtain elsewhere." He looked around the room. "Your ship is equally unimpressive. The design is inefficient, much like your species." Alan saw Ambassador Kayes' smile falter slightly. "Commander," she began, "perhaps we could discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Kha'Zix interrupted. "The Phyrexian Empire has existed for 10,000 years. We mastered space travel when humans were still living in caves. Your presence here is merely a curiosity, nothing more." Alan stepped forward before he could stop himself. "With respect, Commander, curiosities often become necessities. Humanity has advanced faster than any species in recorded history." The room fell completely silent. No one had expected a security officer to speak. Kha'Zix turned slowly, his yellow eyes fixing on Alan. "You address me, little human." "Lieutenant Alan Murphy, sir, Earth Alliance Security." "A guard," Kha'Zix said dismissively, speaking on matters beyond his understanding. "I understand disrespect when I see it," Alan replied, feeling Ambassador Kayes' warning glare. Kha'Zix's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Interesting. Your species lacks physical strength, technological advancement, and political influence, yet you do not lack courage." He stepped closer to Alan, or perhaps it is merely stupidity. "Commander," Ambassador Kayes tried to intervene. "Please excuse my officers." "No," Kha'Zix raised a clawed hand. "The little human wishes to defend your honor." His eyes never left Alan. In the old traditions of the Confederation, such matters were settled directly. The gathered aliens murmured in surprise. Lieutenant Murphy, Kazix said formally, I issue challenge according to the ancient compact. A duel to first blood, to settle this matter of respect. The room erupted in shocked whispers. No one had invoked the ancient compact in nearly 50 years, and never against a human. The door to Captain Patricia Ortiz's office slid shut with a soft hiss. Alan stood at attention, facing not only the captain but also Ambassador Kais and 3 other senior officers. None of them looked happy. Lieutenant Murphy, Captain Ortiz said slowly, do you understand what you've done? I defended our species' honor, Captain, Alan replied. Ambassador Kais shook her head. You've placed us in an impossible situation. No human has ever accepted a Vrexian challenge. For good reason. The Vrexians are built for combat, added Dr. Eric Daniels, the ship's chief medical officer. Enhanced muscle density, protective scales, reflexes faster than ours. You wouldn't stand a chance. Alan kept his face neutral. I haven't accepted the challenge yet. And you won't, Captain Ortiz said firmly. We'll issue a formal apology to Commander Kazix and request the challenge be withdrawn. That would make humans look even weaker, Alan argued. The entire Confederation already sees us as primitive. If we back down now, better to look weak than to have one of our officers killed in a pointless duel, Ambassador Kais interrupted. This isn't a movie, Lieutenant. This is galactic politics. Alan took a deep breath. With respect, I'd like 24 hours to research dueling protocols before we respond. Captain Ortiz studied him for a moment. Fine. 24 hours. But I expect a full report, and I still intend to decline this challenge. Later that evening, Alan sat in the ship's digital library, scrolling through ancient Confederation texts. The blue light from the screen illuminated his concentrated face. He had been searching for 6 hours straight. Still at it, Dr. Daniels appeared with 2 cups of coffee. I found something, Alan said, accepting the coffee gratefully. According to the ancient compact, the challenged party has the right to select the form of combat. Dr. Daniels raised an eyebrow. So I don't have to fight Kazix on his terms. I can choose the battlefield. Alan pulled up another document. Earthboxing. No claws, no weapons, just fists. You can't be serious. Dr. Daniels laughed, but his smile faded when he saw Alan's expression. Alan, even in boxing, a Vrexian would crush you. Maybe, maybe not. Alan showed him more files. Vrexians have 2 weaknesses. First, they tire quickly in extended combat. Second, they have poor lateral movement. Their spine doesn't flex side to side well. Dr. Daniels stared at him. You're actually considering accepting. I'm going to accept, Alan corrected him, but I need your help. The next morning, the entire command staff looked stunned as Alan presented his plan. Absolutely not, Captain Ortiz said immediately. I forbid this. Captain, the ancient compact is clear, Alan replied. If we refuse the challenge without proper cause, the Vrexians can demand diplomatic penalties. Ambassador Kais frowned. What penalties? Reduction of our voting rights in the Confederation for 5 years, Alan explained, effectively making Earth a second-class member. The room fell silent. And you truly believe you can win? Ambassador Kais asked quietly. Not win. Survive, Alan clarified. The duel is to first blood. If I can last long enough, land one good hit, I might be able to end it honorably. Dr. Liz Nguyen, the ship's xenobiologist, spoke up. Lieutenant Murphy asked me to analyze Vrexian physiology. He's right about their weaknesses. They're built for short, explosive combat, not endurance matches. Captain Ortiz sighed deeply. This is against my better judgment, but I can see you've made up your mind. She looked at Alan with a mixture of frustration and respect. If you're determined to do this, we'll back you. 2 hours later, Alan stood before Commander Kazix in the formal meeting room. Representatives from 12 species watched with interest. "Lieutenant Murphy," Kazix said with amusement, "have you come to apologize?" "I've come to accept your challenge," Alan replied clearly. "As is my right under the ancient compact, I choose the combat form." He paused, looking directly into the Phyrexian's yellow eyes. "Earth boxing. No weapons, no claws. Just skill against skill." Kazik's expression shifted from surprise to delight. The human accepts and chooses hand combat. Against a Phyrexian. He laughed, a harsh sound that made several aliens flinch. "I accept your terms. 3 days from now, we will meet in the Nexus 7 arena." As murmurs spread through the room, Kazix leaned closer to Alan. "You have more courage than sense, little human. I will try not to kill you too quickly." The ship's training room had been sealed off with equipment maintenance notices on the doors. Inside, Alan ducked under a practice drone's swing and countered with a sharp jab to its sensor panel. "Better," Eric said, adjusting the settings on his tablet. "But you're still dropping your left guard." Alan wiped sweat from his forehead. "How long was that round?" 3 minutes. In the real fight, each round will be 2 minutes with 1 minute rest." Alan nodded and took a water bottle from Dr. Nguyen, who was monitoring his vital signs. "Your heart rate is recovering faster," she said, checking her data. "But I'm worried about these simulations. The drone doesn't move like a Phyrexian." "It's the best we can do," Eric replied. "No one on board has ever seen a Phyrexian fight up close." The door slid open unexpectedly. Captain Ortiz entered, her expression tight. "Captain." Alan straightened up, suddenly aware of the unauthorized training session. "At ease, Lieutenant." She looked around the room. "I suspected something like this. You should have told me." "I didn't want to put you in a difficult position," Alan said. Captain Ortiz sighed. "You've already done that by accepting the challenge." She walked closer. "The Earth Council is furious. They're debating whether to recall Ambassador Keyes." "What? Why?" Alan asked. "Because a junior officer starting an interspecies incident looks bad. Very bad." She studied the training setup. "But since you're determined to go through with this, you should know what you're up against." She activated her tablet and projected a video onto the wall. It showed a Phyrexian military training exercise. The aliens moved with frightening speed, their powerful limbs breaking through barriers that would have stopped a human cold. "This is from their public broadcasts," Captain Ortiz explained. "They want us to see it." "Psychological warfare," Eric muttered. Alan watched carefully. "They're strong and fast, but look at their movements, all forward and backward. Almost no side-to-side agility." "That matches my analysis," Dr. Nguyen confirmed. "Their skeletal structure limits lateral movement." "There's more," Captain Ortiz said. "The Phyrexians are spreading messages across the Confederation. They're calling humans weak, claiming we'll back out of the challenge." Alan's jaw tightened. "We won't." "Is this really worth it?" Eric asked. "One alien insulted us. So what?" "It's not about the insult," Alan replied. "It's about how the entire Confederation sees humanity. If we're ever going to be respected, we need to stand our ground somewhere." He paused. "This is that somewhere." Captain Ortiz studied him for a moment. "You have 48 hours until the duel. What do you need?" "More practice," Alan said. "And I need to review everything we have on Phyrexian physiology. Dr. Nguyen will help you with that." Captain Ortiz turned to leave, then stopped. "Lieutenant, win or lose, this will change things for Earth. Make sure it changes them for the better." After she left, Alan returned to training with renewed focus. Hours passed in a blur of practice bouts and strategy sessions. That evening, as Alan reviewed Phyrexian anatomy charts in his quarters, his communication panel chimed. A message from Earth. From his grandfather. The old man's weathered face appeared on screen. "Alan, your mother told me what's happening. crazy situation you've got yourself into." His eyes, still sharp despite his age, showed concern. "I was a boxer for 20 years before I was a farmer. Remember what I always told you." Alan smiled. "Never try to be stronger than your opponent. Be smarter." "Exactly." His grandfather leaned closer to the camera. "Those aliens, they're counting on their strength. That's their mistake." He tapped his temple. "Boxing isn't about being strongest. It's about turning your opponent's power against them." For the first time since accepting the challenge, Alan felt a spark of confidence. His grandfather was right. He didn't need to overpower a Vrexian. He just needed to outsmart one. "Thanks, Grandpa," Alan said. "I needed that." After ending the call, Alan turned back to the Vrexian anatomy charts with fresh eyes. He wasn't looking for weaknesses anymore. He was looking for opportunities. Nexus 7 was the largest neutral space station in the sector. As the Endeavour approached the massive ring-shaped structure, Alan stood at the viewing port, watching it grow larger. "It's bigger than I expected," he said. Ambassador Kais joined him. "Nexus 7 can hold representatives from over 50 species. The central arena alone seats 10,000. Alan turned to her. 10,000. Word of the duel has spread. Every major species in the Confederation has sent observers. She looked at him carefully. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Alan replied. The docking process took nearly an hour. When they finally walked through the airlock, Alan was surprised to see a delegation waiting for them. 4 aliens of different species stood in formal robes. "The Galactic Arbiters," Ambassador Kais whispered. "They oversee all formal challenges." The tallest arbiter, a thin, pale being with 4 arms, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Alan Murphy of Earth." "Yes," Alan confirmed. "I am Chief Arbiter Zol. We must verify the terms of combat before tomorrow's proceedings." The arbiter's voice was surprisingly deep. "Please come with us." Alan glanced at Captain Ortiz, who nodded. "We'll meet you at the Earth quarters," she said. The arbiters led Alan through the station's winding corridors. Aliens of all shapes and sizes stopped to stare as he passed. Some whispered behind claws or tentacles. Others simply looked at him with what he could only interpret as pity. They arrived at a circular chamber with a raised platform in the center. "Stand there," Arbiter Zol instructed. When Alan stepped onto the platform, a blue light scanned him from head to toe. "Confirmation complete. Human male, standard physiology," announced a computerized voice. "No enhancements or modifications detected." "The terms you selected are Earth boxing," said another arbiter, a squat, orange-skinned creature. "Our records have limited information on this combat form. It's a test of skill using only the hands, formed into fists," Alan explained, demonstrating a boxer's stance. "No kicking, no weapons." The arbiters conferred among themselves. "Acceptable," Arbiter Zol finally declared. "Commander Kha'Zix has been informed and agrees to these limitations." He handed Alan a small data tablet. "These are the complete rules. Study them well." As Alan was escorted back to the Earth quarters, he passed a viewing gallery overlooking the arena. He stopped, surprised by its size. The circular combat area was surrounded by rising tiers of seats, most already filled with aliens. "Quite a crowd for your defeat, human." Alan turned to find Commander Kha'Zix standing behind him, flanked by 2 Vrexian guards. "I haven't lost yet," Alan replied calmly. Kha'Zix moved closer. Even without his military armor, the Vrexian was imposing in simple training clothes. "I study your earth boxing, a primitive form of combat." "Effective, though," Alan said, "perhaps against other soft-skinned humans." Kha'Zix flexed his clawed hands. "My scales will barely feel your blows." Alan kept his expression neutral. "We'll see tomorrow." "Yes, we will." Kha'Zix's mouth formed what might have been a smile. "Sleep well, human. It may be your last night." After the Vrexian left, Alan continued to his assigned quarters. The Earth delegation had been given a small section of the station with rooms for each of them. Inside his room, Alan found a message waiting on his communication panel. It was from Dr. Nguyen. Found something important. Meeting in Captain Ortiz's room in 1 hour. When Alan arrived at the captain's quarters, he found his entire support team waiting. Captain Ortiz, Ambassador Kays, Dr. Daniels, and Dr. Nguyen. "What did you find?" Alan asked. Dr. Nguyen displayed a 3D model of Vrexian anatomy. "I've been reviewing combat footage. The Vrexians have one significant vulnerability they've been hiding." She pointed to a spot where the neck met the shoulder. "Their nerve cluster is close to the surface here. A direct hit could cause temporary paralysis." "That's our target," Dr. Daniels said. "Hit that spot hard enough, and you might actually win this thing." Alan studied the model carefully, memorizing the location. "There's one more thing," Captain Ortiz said. "The betting pools." She showed him her tablet. "The odds against you are 1,000 to 1. "That bad?" Alan asked. "Actually," Ambassador Kays said with a small smile, "several Earth diplomats have placed substantial bets on you, if you win." "When I win," Alan corrected her, "drinks are on me." The sound of the crowd was like ocean waves crashing against a cliff. Alan sat in the preparation room, hands wrapped in the traditional boxing style, trying to stay calm. Dr. Daniels checked his vitals one last time. "Heart rate elevated, but that's normal," Eric said. "Adrenaline is high, also normal." Alan nodded silently. Through the walls, he could hear the announcer's voice booming across the arena, though he couldn't make out the words. Captain Ortiz entered the room. "It's time," she said. "The arbiters are ready." Alan stood up and rolled his shoulders. He wore simple boxing shorts and a tank top, his feet in lightweight boxing shoes. Next to him, Dr. Daniels picked up a water bottle and towel. "Remember," Dr. Nguyen said, "aim for the nerve cluster we discussed, and watch his right side. Vrexians favor it heavily. And don't let him corner you," Captain Ortiz added. "Keep moving." Alan took a deep breath. "Let's do this." The corridor leading to the arena seemed endless. With each step, the roar of the crowd grew louder. Finally, they reached a set of large doors that slid open automatically. The brightness of the arena lights momentarily blinded him. When his eyes adjusted, Alan saw what seemed like an endless sea of alien faces. The circular fighting space in the center was raised on a platform, surrounded by force field barriers that glowed faintly blue. The announcer's voice echoed through the space. "Representing Earth, Lieutenant Alan Murphy." A mix of cheers and jeers erupted from the crowd. Alan walked forward, trying to appear confident. He looked up at the massive screen suspended above the arena, which showed close-ups of his face. He looked small, even to himself. And representing the Vrexian Empire, Commander Kha'Zix. The opposite doors opened, and Kha'Zix strode out. The Vrexian wore what looked like modified armor, lighter than military gear, but still offering protection. It covered his torso, but left his arms free. The crowd erupted in cheers for the Vrexian. Alan frowned. "Is that allowed?" he whispered to Dr. Daniels. Before Eric could answer, Arbiter Zol floated to the center of the arena. "The terms of combat have been agreed upon. Earthboxing to first blood or surrender." The Arbiter looked at Alan. "Do you confirm these terms?" "I do," Alan replied. "Commander Kha'Zix, do you confirm these terms?" "I do," the Vrexian said, his voice carrying easily across the space. "The protective gear has been approved," Arbiter Zol added, addressing Alan's unspoken question. "It provides no offensive advantage." Alan kept his face neutral despite his frustration. The rules had been bent to favor the Vrexian, but complaining now would look weak. "Combatants, approach," Arbiter Zol instructed. Alan and Kha'Zix moved to the center of the ring. Up close, the size difference was stark. Alan, at 6 feet tall, had to look up to meet the Vrexian's yellow eyes. Last chance to withdraw. Human, Kha'Zix said quietly. Not happening, Alan replied. The Arbiter moved back. Begin at the signal. A high-pitched tone sounded, and Kha'Zix moved with shocking speed. His first punch caught Alan on the shoulder, sending him staggering backward. Pain exploded through his arm, but he managed to stay on his feet. The crowd roared as Kha'Zix pressed forward, throwing powerful blows that Alan barely dodged. One caught him in the ribs, and Alan felt something crack. He gasped but kept moving, remembering his grandfather's advice. Don't try to match his strength. Alan fought. Move, observe, wait. For the entire first round, Alan was on the defensive, taking hits but staying mobile. By the time the signal ended the round, his left eye was swelling shut, and blood trickled from his nose. He stumbled back to his corner where Dr. Daniels waited. You're getting destroyed out there, Eric said, applying a cooling pack to Alan's eye. I know, Alan replied, breathing hard, but I'm learning how he moves. Dr. Nguyen checked his ribs quickly. Bruised, not broken. You can continue. Good, Alan said, watching Kha'Zix across the ring. The Vrexian looked barely winded. Because I just found his pattern. The signal for round 2 sounded. Alan moved forward with new purpose. His stance changed subtly from the previous round. The crowd murmured in surprise. They had expected the human to be more cautious after the beating he'd taken. Kha'Zix seemed pleased by Alan's approach. Ready for more punishment, he growled. Instead of responding, Alan circled to his left, forcing the Vrexian to pivot. Just as Dr. Nguyen had predicted, Kha'Zix moved stiffly when turning. Alan darted in, landing a quick jab to the Vrexian's side before dancing away. The blow hardly seemed to register on Kha'Zix, but the crowd reacted with surprise. A human had actually landed a hit. Lucky strike, Kha'Zix said, advancing again with the same powerful, straight-ahead movement he'd shown in the first round. This time, Alan was ready. He let Kha'Zix come forward, then stepped aside at the last moment, using the Vrexian's momentum against him. As Kha'Zix passed, Alan landed another punch, this one to the back of the alien's shoulder. Kha'Zix spun around, yellow eyes narrowing. You've learned nothing, he snarled, launching another attack. But Alan had learned. The pattern was clear now. Kha'Zix relied on forward power and had 3 main attacks that he cycled through. Alan began to anticipate each move, slipping just beyond the Vrexian's reach and countering with quick jabs. None of Alan's punches seemed to do much damage, but he wasn't trying to hurt Kha'Zix yet. He was testing, probing, looking for the right moment to strike the nerve cluster Dr. Nguyen had identified. By the middle of the round, a change had come over the crowd. The expected quick victory hadn't materialized. Instead, they were watching a human not just survive, but occasionally land blows on a Vrexian warrior. In Alan's corner, Dr. Daniels nudged Dr. Nguyen. Look at Kha'Zix's breathing, he whispered. It's getting heavier. Just as I predicted, she replied. Vrexians aren't built for extended combat. Back in the ring, Kha'Zix's frustration was growing. His attacks became wilder, more desperate. After Alan dodged another powerful swing, Kha'Zix roared in anger. Stand and fight like a warrior, he demanded. I'm fighting smart, Alan replied, landing another quick jab before moving away. That's what humans do. The second round ended, and Alan returned to his corner with a new confidence. His body ached, and fresh bruises were forming where Kha'Zix had landed glancing blows, but he was still in the fight. You're doing it, Dr. Daniels said, wiping blood from a cut above Alan's eye. He's getting tired and angry. Keep it up. Dr. Nguyen leaned in close. His right side is dropping slightly when he throws the left punch. That's your opening to hit the nerve cluster. Alan nodded, taking a drink of water. Across the ring, he could see Vrexian handlers fanning Kha'Zix, who was breathing heavily. In the audience, Ambassador Kais turned to Captain Ortiz. Can he actually win this? I don't know, Ortiz replied honestly, But he's already accomplished something just by lasting this long. The signal for round 3 sounded. Alan moved to the center of the ring with renewed purpose. Kha'Zix charged forward, abandoning technique for raw aggression. Alan sidestepped the first wild swing, but the second caught him in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around. Pain shot through his arm, but he managed to keep his feet. Kha'Zix pressed his advantage, driving Alan toward the edge of the ring. The crowd rose to its feet, sensing the end was near. But Alan had been waiting for this moment, for Kha'Zix to commit fully to an attack. As the Phyrexian threw a powerful left punch, his right side dropped just as Dr. Nguyen had predicted. Time seemed to slow down. Alan saw the opening, ducked under the punch, and drove upward with all his strength. His fist aimed at the exact spot where neck met shoulder on the Phyrexian's body. His knuckles connected with scales, then pushed through to the nerves beneath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kha'Zix's yellow eyes widened in shock. Kha'Zix's entire right side went limp. The massive Phyrexian staggered sideways, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Alan didn't waste the opportunity. He stepped in and delivered a perfect combination. Left jab, right cross, left hook, each blow landing precisely where he aimed. The final punch caught Kha'Zix squarely on the jaw. The Phyrexian's eyes rolled back, and his 7-foot frame crashed to the mat with a thud that seemed to shake the entire arena. Complete silence fell over the crowd. 10,000 aliens stared in disbelief. A human had just knocked out a Phyrexian warrior. Arbiter Zol floated forward hesitantly, as if unsure how to proceed. This clearly wasn't the outcome anyone had expected. The Arbiter checked Kha'Zix, then raised a hand. Commander Kha'Zix is unable to continue. Lieutenant Alan Murphy is declared victor by knockout. For 3 heartbeats, the silence held. Then the arena erupted into chaos. Some aliens cheered wildly while others shouted in protest. Many simply sat in stunned silence. Dr. Daniels and Dr. Nguyen rushed into the ring. Eric grabbed Alan's hand and raised it high while Liz checked him for injuries. "You did it," Eric shouted over the noise. "You actually did it." Alan could hardly believe it himself. His body ached, his left eye was swollen shut, and he could taste blood in his mouth. But he was standing, and Kha'Zix wasn't. A medical team arrived to attend to the fallen Phyrexian. Alan limped over and knelt beside his opponent. "Will he be all right?" he asked one of the medics. "Yes," the medic replied, surprised by the question. "The nerve paralysis is temporary. He will recover." Kha'Zix's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he seemed confused. Then his gaze focused on Alan, and memory returned. "You defeated me," he said, his voice barely audible. "It was a good fight," Alan replied. "No human has ever," Kha'Zix began, then stopped. "You fought with honor." Before Alan could respond, the medical team lifted Kha'Zix onto a stretcher and carried him away. Captain Ortiz and Ambassador Kais pushed through the crowd that had flooded the arena. "That was incredible," the captain said, clapping Alan on the shoulder, then wincing when he flinched in pain. "Sorry." Ambassador Kais looked stunned. "The Tellurian ambassador just told me they want to discuss a technology exchange program. They've been refusing our calls for months. And the Galactic Council is requesting a formal meeting," Captain Ortiz added. "Suddenly, everyone wants to talk to us." Alan nodded tiredly. "Good. That's what we wanted, right?" Dr. Daniels supported Alan as they made their way back to the preparation room, away from the chaos of the arena. Inside, Alan collapsed onto a bench, exhaustion finally overtaking him. The betting pools, he remembered suddenly. Someone's going to be very rich. Several someones, Captain Ortiz confirmed with a smile. "A number of Earth diplomats placed odds on you at 1,000 to 1. "Smart bet," Alan said, grimacing as Dr. Nguyen applied medical spray to his injuries. A communication panel on the wall chimed. Ambassador Kais answered it, listened for a moment, then turned to Alan with surprise. Commander Kha'Zix is requesting to see you. In private. 20 minutes later, Alan entered the Phyrexian's medical room. Kha'Zix was sitting up on a treatment bed, his right side still supported by medical equipment. "Lieutenant Murphy," he acknowledged. "I underestimated you. I underestimated all humans." "A common mistake," Alan replied. "One I hope won't be repeated. It will not be, by me at least." Kha'Zix's expression was difficult to read. The Phyrexian Empire respects strength. Today you proved humans have it, though not in the way we expected. Different species, different strengths, Alan said. Kha'Zix nodded slowly. "My government has instructed me to offer formal recognition of Earth's status in the Confederation. We will support your voting rights in the next council session." "Thank you," Alan said, surprised by the gesture. As he turned to leave, Kha'Zix spoke again. "Lieutenant, when I recover, I would be interested in learning more about this boxing." Alan smiled. "I'd be happy to teach you. Though next time, maybe we skip the duel part." For the first time, he saw what might have been a genuine smile on the Phyrexian's face. "Agreed."